Looking at politics again, carrying on the same train of thought as we've had from ethno-nationalism and civic nationalism, I want to look at the geopolitical implications of these things from a Nietzschean standpoint. The remigration position, the ethno-nationalist position, this is what we used to call racial nationalism or white nationalism, and tends to break down into smaller nations, rejecting all non-whites. And it is based on race rather than religion or spirituality, and is something of a recherche movement in today's complex world of alliances, and tends therefore to be a form of idealism, as we have discussed and discovered. The nearest we might find in comparison is, say, National Socialism in the 20th century. But even here, National Socialism was connected with other ethnic groups. The Axis powers were Italy, Germany, and Japan. And Muslims from the Middle East also allied themselves with the German forces. So while the Third Reich had an ethno-nationalistic core with the concept of the Aryans and the SS, in practical terms, in practice, it tended to ally itself with other political entities on the basis of ideology. The Japanese ideology and the Italian fascist ideology had things in common with the National Socialist ideology, and therefore they found a common cause. This couldn't be said for their enemies, the Allies, who took the more Machiavellian position of my enemy's enemy is my friend, and so allied with communism, something totally opposed to the capitalism of America and Britain and France. And we see that that policy enabled them to win the war, but has led to a long and fractured Cold War peace. So ethno-nationalism, remigration, doesn't seem to offer much for the future, where the future is obviously going to be one of huge powers within the hemispheres. A geopolitical outlook is needed, and it's not found in remigration, which is an inward-looking, backward-looking movement, a negative movement in my view, which is really there as a panacea for those who are not happy with the world as it is. If we look at civic nationalism, that does have a geopolitical impact, and it's based obviously on the Anglosphere. The common ground of America, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and Britain, common cultures, loosely religious links with the revival of Christianity and ideological Christianity. But in this case, it is very much based on American dominance, which means that the religious outlook is very much what they call Judeo-Christian. And so the axis there is very much America-Israel, and the main exclusions are Islam. And so this Anglosphere position is somewhat of a flawed one, in that inherently it rejects a very important world religion in Islam. And this vitiates the whole Anglosphere outlook of civic nationalism, in my view. Again, when we look at the Axis powers, we see the linking between Muslims and Christians and the rejection of Jews. And as I've said before, this rejectionism, exclusionism of any people, religion, is a handicap for the wider outlook of a geopolitical sphere. To have an advancing and growing and progressing geopolitical power, there needs to be inclusion at the ground level, at the base level, rather than exclusion. So we might look here at Alexander Dugin's concept of Eurasia, where we have a combination of Europe and Russia uniting as a single power. This would be a vast hemisphere power geopolitically, and would obviously be very challenging to the Anglosphere. Hence the constant attempts by the Anglosphere to prevent any link between Europe and Russia. Nietzsche would have understood the Eurasian position, although of course he lived in the era of the Tsars and therefore couldn't see properly this unification, but it is very much on the cards today and very well may be the future of the West in terms of Europe, but not in terms of the Anglosphere, which would leave Britain out in the cold on the edge of Europe and a vassal of the American-Israel axis. And then we look again once more with fresh eyes at Nietzsche's Good Europe. A unification of all of Europe together, including the Jews, not excluding the Jews, and also from his comments on Islam, not excluding Islam either. His comments on Spain when it was under the Moors suggests that Islam and Judaism could very well be assimilated to a Nietzschean European global power. And we might say that also it could overlap with Dugin's Eurasia, as Nietzsche's respect for Russia was quite great. So from a quick survey of these positions, I would say that the Eurasian position has far more promise for the future, whereas the Anglosphere is severely hampered by its rejection of Islam and its adherence to Israel, which are really flawed projects going forward into the future. Therefore, I would say that the future world power will be an Eurasian superpower which would have friendly relations with China and therefore dominate the world, with China and India leaving the Anglosphere to be completely on the back foot as it struggles to maintain the existence of Israel.